I can tell you from having played in that league for 7 years that everybody in the league had one goal, and that was to make sure we beat Matthew Berry. Fire up your tailgate because the NFL is back, people. Get into the action with DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. And with the NFL returning, DraftKings is giving new customers $200 in free bets instantly when you bet $1 or more on any football game. Now listen up because you don't want to miss out on this offer. Head to the DraftKings Sportsbook app now and place a bet of $1 or more on any Week 1 game to receive $200 in free bets instantly. The Sportsbook is not yet available in your state. DraftKings still has huge cash prizes up for grabs all season long with their daily fantasy contests. And for Week 1, DraftKings is giving all new customers a free shot at a $1 million top prize. Nothing adds to the excitement of watching a game quite like having a free shot at $1 million as the top prize. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now and use the promo code WINGO to receive $200 in free bets when you place a $1 bet on any football game. And get a free shot at $1 million top prize with your first deposit. That's promo code WINGO this week at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. Must be 21 or older, New Jersey, Indiana, or Pennsylvania only. New customers only. Minimum $5 deposit and $1 wager required. One per customer and restrictions do apply. See DraftKings.com/sportsbook for details. And if you have a gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER or in Indiana, 1-800-9-WITH-IT. Hey everybody, what's up? Welcome into another preview edition of the Chop Shop. Glad you're here with us. Trey Wingo here. Delighted to be joined on this episode brought to us by DraftKings, which is all about fantasy football. And if you're talking fantasy football, there is only one person you really want to talk to if you want to get the straight skinny about what to do and what not to do. In a previous life, he was known as the talented Mr. Roto. Now he's just Grand Poobah, master of time, space, and dimension when it comes to fantasy football. None other than my longtime good friend, Matthew Berry. What's up, buddy?
Trey, it's good to see you. Good to talk to you on air. We just finished the fantasy football marathon here at ESPN, and I remember you and I did that last year.
Yep, absolutely. And that was actually the last thing I did for ESPN before going on my merry way and having all these wonderful new adventures. And I got to tell you, I came into that studio that day a little cranky and a little hungry, and who but my good friend Matthew Berry shows up with a bag full of Chick-fil-A sandwiches, and he actually brought two because he knew he was going to be hungry, and he gave me one. So I was very appreciative of that.
Sharing is caring, and it made for a better show.
It did.
You ate, you were good, we had a long taping day.
Yeah.
So you and I forever bonded by Chick-fil-A.
And why wouldn't we be? So we got a lot to get into here because we're going to help people get themselves set for doing the right thing and perhaps most importantly, Matthew, avoiding doing the wrong thing when it comes to drafting your fantasy team. So let's just go with this premise right off the top. If you had 3 golden rules that you want to put in place to make sure you win on draft night and give yourself the best possible team, what would be Matthew Berry's 3 golden fantasy draft rules?
Okay, so number 1 is understanding positional depth.
Yep.
And understanding positional depth as it relates to your league. If you were playing in an ESPN standard 10-team league, for example, you only need one quarterback. Quarterback is pretty deep. You can wait. I get it. You love Patrick Mahomes, you love Josh Allen, but you can wait a little bit to get a quarterback because the position is deep. You only need to start 10 in that one league. But if you're in a 14-team super flex league where you start 2 quarterbacks, and in essence, in every given week, 28 quarterbacks are going to be starting in the league, the quarterback should be, your first-round picks. So understanding positional depth, I will tell you just in general that wide receiver is the deepest position, followed by quarterback. Running back is fairly scarce. Ideally, you get a very good one. At least in the first round, you get kind of an anchor running back. Tight end, I want to either be one of the first people in my league or one of the last people in my league to draft a tight end. I think there's a tier after the first couple of guys. Then there's not a huge difference between, call it 5 through 10. And then there's, some sleeper guys that can become this year's Darren Waller, Robert Tonyan, Logan Thomas. So that's number 1. Number 2 is understanding, as we talk about quarterbacks, understanding how important rushing quarterbacks are. Yeah. Trey, 8 of the top 10 quarterbacks from last year in fantasy points had at least 200 yards rushing. The 2 quarterbacks that didn't, Aaron Rodgers and Tom Brady.
Yeah.
So listen, if you can get a drop back passer that'll throw 4,500 yards and 40 touchdowns, okay, great, you're good. And Aaron Rodgers, by the way, had a lot of rushing touchdowns as well. But generally speaking, what you want is you want a mobile quarterback. You want a quarterback, makes sort of sense when you think about it, quarterback that can get you points both with his arm and his legs. I mean, Patrick Mahomes got over 200 yards and was unhealthy. He's more mobile. But then you also think about Kyler Murray and Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson. Russell Wilson ran for over 500 yards last year. Dak Prescott, before he got injured, mobile and a guy that's usually got about 5-6 rushing touchdowns a year. So very important to get a rushing quarterback like guys like Trey Lance and Justin Fields. We'll talk about them later. And then finally, high upside bench picks. Speaking of Justin Fields or Trey Lance. The thing of it is, Trey, is that I think what happens is people start to think of fantasy as a season-long game, and it's actually not a season-long game. It is a weekly game played over the course of a season. Your goal is in any given week to beat one opponent. And it's not enough to get players that score a lot of points. The most important thing is knowing when to start those players. Yeah. And so I call this the never James White rule. Now, James White is a fine player.
Right.
There's nothing wrong with James White.
However,
he's a very good NFL player.
However,
over the last 2 years, James White is like running back 23 in fantasy points per game.
Yeah.
He's fine. He's solid. But in that time, he has just one game of more than 16 fantasy points. Like, there's just very little upside to James White. Whereas players like Jamal Williams has multiple games with more than 16 fantasy points. Because Jamal Williams, you knew when to start him and when not to. When Aaron Jones is out, you start Jamal Williams. He's a top 8 fantasy running back. He crushed the couple of weeks last year when Aaron Jones was out. Think about somebody like Nyheim Hines, who's also kind of James White. Nyheim Hines had 21 fantasy points week 1 last year. Week 2, he had 1.4. There's no rhyme or reason to when Nyheim Hines had good games. He had 4 good games last year, and they were like, I think, weeks 1, 7, 8, and 12, something like that. I don't have that off the top of my head, but like just completely random. So I think it's important that when you're in your later rounds to draft high upside guys, but more importantly, high upside guys that you can see a clear path for as to knowing when they would be starting for you, whether it's a wide receiver that you think could pop or a running back that has a clear path to playing time, even if that path is, hey, Tony Pollard is one hamstring away from being a top 5 fantasy running back as the backup to Ezekiel Elliott.
Well, listen, of all the things that you just said there, one of the things that has always stuck with me is the most important thing, don't get married to the team you draft on draft night because things change. Like, if you want to be a good fantasy football owner and a fantasy football champion, you have to take a Bill Belichick approach, which is some guy's going to play this week, some guy's going to be featured next week. And that's the one thing that has always really resonated with me, because you draft this team, you think, this is my team. The answer is no. Your team is going to change dramatically throughout the season, and you need to be able to process that.
That's exactly right, Trey. When you're on draft day, you're building a foundation. Yeah. You're not building the whole house. Right. You're building a foundation. Ideally, your first 5 picks or so, those are your Nick Chubbs, your Derrick Henrys, your Devontae Adams, your Travis Kelce's of the world. Those are the guys that are going to start week in, week out, no matter what. But after those first 5, it's going to be a little mix and match. And so giving yourself flexibility and giving yourself guys that could win you a week in a specific week is important, rather than guys like James White, who are fine, but James White's never winning you a game. And if you ever find yourself in a week where you need 10 points out of a running back, 8 to 10 points in PPR out of a running back, which is basically what James White is every week, you can find similar production on the waiver wire. There's no reason to draft a James White, even though at the end of the year he'll be a top 25 running back. Yeah. You just don't know when that is. And one last piece about that foundational thing, I often see people make this mistake in drafts. They'll sit there and they're like, oh man, I'm running out, there's no quarterbacks. Like, let me just reach for a quarterback. Or there's this big running back run. And I know this, I can't believe DK Metcalf fell to me in the 3rd, but I can't do it because I desperately need a running back, so let me take Myles Gaskin. And I actually like Myles Gaskin this year, but you're insane to pass up DK Metcalf
Correct.
For Myles Gaskin. Understand that, again, when the team you leave draft day with is not the team that you have to play all year long. Build up some position. If you're finding yourself locked out of a position, instead of just grabbing the last running back just to have a guy, build up depth at wide receiver, and then you know what? Then you can trade.
Right.
Give yourself something to wheel and deal. I'm always a believer in, again, you don't need to win the league at the draft.
Yeah.
You just need to give yourself a solid base from which to work with.
Flexibility clearly matters. And again, to be clear, we do have nothing against James White or Myles Gaskin. We were just using them as examples.
As examples, this is all about fantasy production. They're both good running backs.
Everyone knows who the top players are, right? The key is, in what you talk about, finding flexibility and building that foundation and adding a nice bathroom or an extended master bedroom to that foundation, is players that aren't on the top level but you think might break out. So give me 3 or 4 names that you think that aren't really on the tip of the tongue for fantasy football players who might really help them win their league this year.
Well, so listen, these are all tip of the tongue. All these are known quantities. But I'm defining breakout, and we can go deeper if you want.
Sure.
But I define breakout as guys that can take the next level. That can, RB2s that can become top 5 guys at the position, right? Guys that, people that can become top 5 at the position, or potentially, if they're being drafted in the 30s, top 10. So I'll start with one. Jalen Hurts. Jalen Hurts is currently going as quarterback 12 on ESPN, and he's going outside the top 10 most places. I think a lot of people point to the fact that he completed under 52% of his passes last year. There's questions about him as a thrower, and so they're just like, I don't believe it. Okay, here's the thing. Last year, Jalen Hurts gets thrown into the final 4 games of the season. Doug Peterson and his coaching staff are fighting with the front office. It's obviously a toxic situation in Philadelphia. All the pass catchers for him are basically hurt. He completes under 52% of his passes, and yet, Trey, over the 4 games that Jalen Hurts played last year, he averaged 23 fantasy points per game. He had at least 10 points from his rushing alone, and he was the 9th best quarterback in fantasy over those final 4 games. We did a comparison. We did this on the fantasy show, and we also did this on the fantasy marathon as well. This is in my love-hate column as well on ESPN.com. But if you look at the 4 games that Jalen Hurts started as a rookie, and then you look at the final 4 games that Lamar Jackson started his rookie year, because he started more than 4, but you look at the final 4, so you give him a couple of weeks to get into the system. Jalen Hurts is basically better in every category. Lamar Jackson had a better completion percentage, but it was like, I want to say 56 or 58. It wasn't significantly better.
Minuscule difference.
And he didn't throw that much.
Yeah.
Here's the other thing on Jalen Hurts. 25% of his passes last year were at least 15 yards downfield. So that hurt with the completion percentage as well. He was taking deep shots, which we like in fantasy. Yeah. So in 2019, after his rookie year, Lamar Jackson became the MVP of the NFL, won a lot of people their fantasy leagues this year. I'm not saying Jalen Hurts is a 2019 Lamar Jackson, but I think going into his second year, knowing he's the guy, having a coaching staff that was hired with the idea of like, you need to make Jalen Hurts work. My expectation is that he has a monster year. I'm as a top 8 fantasy quarterback, and I think he has the potential to be a top 5 guy, but he's not being drafted like that. They added some pass catchers as well. So Jalen Hurts is one of my guys.
That's very interesting. Okay, give me a couple of other names here.
You're going to call me a homer, but how about Antonio Gibson?
No, I'm not calling you a homer at all. I see that.
But most people would, but Antonio Gibson last year, in the 7 games where he got 15 more touches, averaged almost 20 fantasy points per game, 19.8. He averaged more fantasy points and yards per target than J.D. McKissick. J.D. McKissick caught a ton of balls last year, and I think people forget how little, Trey, you do the draft every year, so you know this better than anyone, but I don't know how many people other than you know the fact that Antonio Gibson didn't play much running back in college at Memphis.
Nope.
Mostly used as a wide receiver. Last year they said they had him in the wide receiver room, and they're like, let's try you out at running back. He was very effective. He converted at the goal line quite a bit, double-digit touchdowns. And you think about Ron Rivera and Scott Turner coming from Carolina, where they used Chris McCaffrey and his versatility so successfully. That's what they want to do with Antonio Gibson. He's going to be more involved in the passing game. He's still going to get all the run. And Washington, I love what they did in the offseason, adding to that offensive line, getting Ryan Fitzpatrick, who will be a big upgrade over the quarterbacks they had last year, adding Curtis Samuel, drafting Diami Brown. That's going to be a good offense that'll be in scoring position more often, especially because their defense is so good. They'll get the ball in good field position. I think Antonio Gibson has top 5 running back upside. he's being drafted outside the top 10, although the buzz on him is starting to increase.
Well, that also makes sense in terms of team construct because the Washington football team knows first and foremost their defense is their strength, and the best way they can play to their strengths is use more of a ground control, sort of clock control management game, which would be featuring the running game and Antonio Gibson.
I'll give you two more breakouts. Number one is Daryl Henderson.
Oh, wow.
Look.
With the injury to Cam, sure, yeah.
By the way, not only the injury to Cam Akers, but Malcolm Brown had 124 touches, and he's now in Miami this year.
Right.
Like, the guys behind Daryl Henderson on the depth chart in Los Angeles, as of this taping, Xavier Jones, Jake Funk. Two young players that they like, but not a real threat to Daryl Henderson's playing time. When Daryl Henderson gets run, he's productive. 14.3 fantasy points per game in the 6 games that he had 12 or more touches last season. Last year, the Rams were second in red zone rush percentage. In the Sean McVay era, they have the 8th most rushing attempts and the 3rd most red zone rush attempts since Sean McVay has become the coach of the Rams. When they get close, they like to run. Yeah. That's another team whose offense I expect to take a step up this year. I think Stafford is a big upgrade over Jared Goff.
No question.
Daryl Henderson's going to be the guy. Again, whether it was Cam Akers last year, Todd Gurley for all of his years, the lead running back in a McVay offense usually is very productive. I am amazed that Henderson's going as low as he is.
All right, give me one more name.
I think Brandon, I'll give you 2 names real quickly. You tell me who you want to talk a little bit about. But Brandon Nyuk and T. Higgins are 2 guys that had a lot of success as rookies last year. I think they take a big step forward now. They're being drafted between 20 and wide receiver 20 and 30. They're certainly known quantity to fantasy managers. But I think both those guys have the potential to become wide receiver ones, top 10 wide receivers this year.
All right, give me T. Higgins I find interesting for a couple of reasons. So give me your thinking on why you think T. Higgins is going to take that step this year.
Had 14 full games last year where he played the entire game. He got 6 or more targets in 13 of them. 14 different catches of 20 or more yards, 7 end zone targets in the 9 full games he played with Joe Burrow. I just love the talent. I think it's weird to me because fantasy value, it's not just about drafting the players, but where you draft them, right? And here's the order they're being drafted on ESPN.com. Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, Tyler Boyd. And it's weird. I get it with Jamar Chase.
Well, that's why I asked about Higgins, right? Because Tyler Boyd was very productive, and they made the big splash to get Jamar Chase. I liked it when they picked T. Higgins in the 2nd round of 2020, but because of the other players you just mentioned, that's why I was curious about T. Higgins.
Yeah, and so I like the value of him. I prefer T. Higgins and Tyler Boyd at cost than Jamar Chase, who's going the earliest of the 3 wide receivers. He's still a rookie. Yeah. And could he have a Justin Jefferson-like year? Of course he could. But they have a lot of guys there. Remember Jamar Chase did not play college football last year.
Right.
So he's 2 years removed from football. I think it might be a little bit of a slower start for Chase than we're expecting. And Joe Burrow, at the time of his injury last year, led the NFL in pass attempts.
Yep.
Like, that was a team that threw the ball. I think they're going to again. I think it's going to be, once again, one of the worst defenses in the NFL. They still are rebuilding there in Cincinnati. So Burrow, who's got as good a wide receiver core as there is in the NFL, I believe there'll be enough volume to go around to the 3 of those guys. I think all will be fantasy productive wide receivers this year. So then you start to look at what does it cost to acquire them. Give me T. Higgins and Tyler Boyd, again, at cost, who are going... Higgins is going 2 rounds after Chase in some leagues that I've seen, and Boyd's going 4 rounds after.
We mentioned Jamar Chase and T. Higgins are on the same team. You're a big believer in the handcuff policy, which is basically if you have a big star, make sure you're available to get his replacement. So with that in mind, give me teams that you think specifically you should draft a ton of players from. Like, for example, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers have more than 3 really good wide receivers. Their wide receiver depth is ridiculous over this next couple of years. So give me a couple of teams that you think are going to be run on in fantasy in terms of, this player's being taken for that team, this player's being taken from that team.
Yeah, you always like to target teams with good offenses, and you mentioned the Buccaneers, the Chiefs are obvious, right? There's some of the obvious ones. Among the more obvious offenses that I think take a big step this year, I'll say the Cowboys, obviously. We expect a healthy Dak. We expect the Cowboys to be a big offense. The Seahawks. I know we hear this every year, Trey. I think this is the year they let Russ cook. I'm a believer in Shane Waldron coming over from the Rams staff to Seattle. I feel like they open that offense up a little bit. And then I'll also say the Rams, obviously, with Matthew Stafford under center. We mentioned the Bengals. I'll give you a couple other sort of under-the-radar teams. You heard me just mention Washington. I do think Washington's offense is going to be sneaky good. I like the Chargers this year under Joe Lombardi coming over from New Orleans. And two more. The Panthers. I'm in on Sam Darnold.
Yeah.
And I like year 2 of Joe Brady. You think about, they get Chris McCaffrey back healthy. They drafted Terrace Marshall, who's having a great camp. They've obviously already got Robbie Anderson and DJ Moore.
Yep.
I don't know how good their offense is going to be. I think Sam Darnold, away from Adam Gase. I still believe in Sam Darnold. So I think that's going to be a sneaky good offense. The Panthers and the Jaguars.
Well, there's not enough time to talk about that last selection, so we got to hold on a minute there. But
Look, bad deep. Look, they have a real quarterback, right? They have a real quarterback.
So. I think so.
Right? We think Trevor Lawrence is the real deal.
Yeah.
Think about their playmakers now, right? You've got Marvin Jones, who, by the way, is a top 20 fantasy wide receiver under Darrell Bevell in Detroit.
Yep.
Marvin Jones is a pro's pro. Laviska Shenault, all sorts
Love
of
Laviska
explosiveness.
Yep.
A lot of people are on Laviska, you and I included. DJ Shark, tough year last for a year, but we saw the explosiveness 2 years ago.
Correct.
Travis Etienne, right? So you draft him, who's obviously an explosive player and a versatile player that they can use out of the backfield. James Robinson was really good last year. Carlos Hyde showed that he had some gas still left in the tank, reunited with Urban Meyer now in Jacksonville, Carlos Hyde. So you suddenly go that's actually some kind of good guys, and then you think, well, is their defense going to be any good? No, they're going to be having to throw. This is going to be an up-tempo offense that's going to be, top 10 team in pass attempts. So I think that's a sneaky offense to find some fantasy value in.
That's actually a very interesting one, and I'm actually glad we had that discussion. But we're going to take a quick break here, and when we come back, we'll talk about the players that you need to sort of hear to the Monty Python and the Holy Grail of philosophy when it comes to drafting them. Run away! We'll be right back. Stay with us. As you know, football is right around the corner, and you need to get in on the action with DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. And with the NFL returning, DraftKings is doing this. They're giving you new customers $200 in free bets instantly when you bet $1 or more on any football game. Now listen up, because you don't want to miss this. Head to the DraftKings Sportsbook app now and place a bet of $1 or more on any Week 1 game to receive $200 in free bets instantly. If sportsbooks are not available in your state, DraftKings still has huge cash prizes up for grabs all season long with their daily fantasy contests. And for Week 1, DraftKings is giving all new customers a free shot at a $1 million top prize. Look, nothing adds to the excitement of watching a game quite like having a free shot at $1 million. So download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now and use the promo code WINGO to receive $200 in free bets when you place a $1 bet on any football game and get a free shot at $1 million top prize with your first deposit. That's promo code WINGO for a limited time only at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. Must be 21 or older, New Jersey, Indiana, or Pennsylvania only, new customers only. Minimum $5 deposit and $1 wager required. One per customer. Restrictions do apply. See DraftKings.com/sportsbook for details. And if you have a gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER or in Indiana, 1-800-9-WITH-IT. All right, back with Matthew Berry on this Chop Shop Preview Fantasy Football edition of the 2021 season. So we just spent a large portion, Matthew, of the first half of the show talking about teams you like, how to draft, players you should target. There's the other side of this. Like, there's always the things you should do, and maybe more importantly, the things you should not do, or the players you should stay away from. So give me 3 names, let's say, of players that a lot of people think, oh, I should draft this person, and you would be like, hold on a minute.
Well, I'll start with Josh Jacobs for the Raiders, who, for the first 2 years he's been in the NFL, has been a fantasy superstar.
Yep.
But here's a concern on Jacobs. He's not really involved in the passing game. So what Jacobs needs for his fantasy value is volume, insane volume, which up till now he's gotten. But get this. For his career, 28 games, Josh Jacobs has never scored double-digit fantasy points in a game where he's had fewer than 15 touches. He's got 16 career games, like a full NFL season, at least prior to this year. In 16 career games, he's had less than 20 touches. And 20 touches is a lot.
Yeah.
In the 16 career games where he's gotten fewer than 20 touches, he averages 10.5 fantasy points per game. Just to give you some context, 10.5 is less than what Rex Burkhead averaged last year, running back 34.
Yeah.
Rex Burkhead averaged 10.8. Josh Jacobs, in games in which he gets less than 20 touches, averages 10.5 fantasy points per game for his career. You think about, like, I was on Shefty's podcast the other day, and one of the things we talked about is, like, follow the money. Well, what did the Raiders do this year? They signed Kenyon Drake to a big deal.
Yep.
Kenyon Drake is not coming to the Raiders to just, carry the clipboard for Josh Jacobs. He's going to be involved in this offense. I still think Josh Jacobs is the 1A, and Drake is more of a third down back, 66% to 33%. But, like, Josh Jacobs is not going to get the insane volume that he has before. I have him as a flex play. He's going inside the top 20 on ESPN. I have him much more as a mid-tier flex play, and honestly, I think there's guys with more upside because he's not involved in the passing game. So that's one guy that I probably won't have a lot of shares of this year.
That one is really fascinating, and it speaks to a larger issue outside of fantasy football with the Raiders. If you have Josh Jacobs and you had a defense that was horrendous last year, why would you go out and give big money to Kenyon Drake, which is a whole other discussion we can have on the philosophy that John Gruden and Mike Mayock, the GM, have done. Okay, so just out of curiosity, like going into the season or at the moment of this taping, how many leagues are you in right now?
How many have I already drafted, or how many that I'm currently in, that I'm planning on playing?
How many are you planning on being in for the season?
Probably around 16.
I mean, okay, like I'll do 4, and I think
Right.
I'm crazy. So you just quadrupled what I'm doing. Is it manic?
and
Is it because you don't enjoy sleep? What is it?
It's a lot of things. Well, so it's so leagues that I'm in, there's sort of 4 buckets, and in fact it's actually more than 16, which I'll explain in a second. So leagues that I've been in with friends forever. Like, I'm in the league with all my college buddies. Like, that league I'll be in till the day I die, right?
Yeah.
So I've been in that league for over 20 years. So there's leagues with friends of mine that I like a lot. Then there's work obligation leagues, right? That, like, just because of my job, that I need to. There's some work leagues that I enjoy. I love the people I work with, but there's some leagues where it's just like, we need you to do this. Sometimes you do a deal with a sponsor or something like that. Like, hey, and we want you to be in a league with all of our franchisees or whatever it is, right? So there are leagues that you do for work, whether it's ESPN or other outside businesses that I have. And then there are quote-unquote expert leagues that you get other people in the fantasy industry invite you to be in their league. And so you want to do that to support the industry, to support friends of yours that are on websites that don't have the kind of traffic that ESPN does. So there's that. And then the fourth kind of league that I'm in, and this isn't even included in the 16, but I've been very blessed, thanks to the popularity of both fantasy football and ESPN, that, I get hit up for fantasy advice by celebrities and musicians and CEOs and VIPs. And so when I'm a fan of those people, I'm very happy to help them out. And so there's a handful of celebrities that I help draft, that I help draft their team. They'll text me for advice, and I'll give them advice. And so I sort of need to pay it. Right. I mean, total. Like, did you catch those names I'm about to drop? So I feel like I have to keep track of their leagues so that when this person texts me, I have to be like, oh, I can give you advice, right?
Yeah.
So, like, knowing their league rules and settings, so I sort of keep track of all that. So 4 buckets of leagues.
Yeah, and the big one always when at work has to be the ESPN War Room League. For those that don't know, the War Room was the room where we all sat together on Sundays and watched all the games, and that's the name of that league comes from. And I can tell you from having played in that league for 7 years that everybody in the league had one goal, and that was to make sure we beat Matthew Berry. Like, we didn't care. We really didn't care who else won. We just wanted to make sure Matthew didn't win because, he's the fantasy expert. It's like being the Super Bowl champ. Like, you have a target on your back. So I have to say kudos to you, Matthew, because every year all we wanted to do and what they still want to do is just gang up on you and beat you up.
And it's insane to me when you think about who else is in this league, Trey. Like, you have Shefty and Mort are in this league, who have the phone number of every general manager, every coach, every player. You have guys in the league like Louis Riddick, that know everyone, also know everyone. You have Teddy Bruschi, right? So it's people that have insane connections. I'll never forget, like, one of my first years in the league, I was trying to make a trade for a wide receiver, and I won't say who I did this with, but I remember talking with one of the people in the league, and I said, "Hey, I want to trade for this wide receiver. I'll give you this running back." And so like, yeah, I think that sounds good. I need a wide receiver. Let's just talk in the afternoon and we can confirm it. I just want to think about it, but I'll likely do it. I said, great. So we checked back in the afternoon, and he goes, nah, I'm not doing the deal. I'm like, what's wrong? I mean, they're pretty fair. I thought you needed a wide receiver. I need a running back. The players are pretty similar. This seems like a fair deal. He goes, I texted his quarterback. He doesn't like him. Like, what league in America can the other people in the league, like, text the quarterback and say, hey, I'm thinking about trading for this guy on your team. What do you think? Yeah. And the quarterback's like, yeah, I don't like him. Yeah. He ain't getting the ball that much.
That's what we call good inside information.
Right. So it's like I don't understand why everyone in the league is so like, oh, we got to beat Barry.
Because you're like, Matthew Barry. That's the whole point. I know,
but, like, it's like, you know what I mean? Like, listen, when Shefty and I both call Kyle Shanahan, guess who Kyle's calling back? It ain't me.
Correct. That's an accurate statement. Which, by the way, this leads me to one of my all-time favorite stories, and you probably remember this. Like, I didn't care if I beat anybody else that year. I just wanted to make sure I beat you, right? And there was one game where I was in the War Room League, and one of my wide receivers that week was Eddie Royal. Now, this isn't this isn't even Denver Broncos like first couple of years good Eddie Royal. This is completely washed San Diego Charger wide receiver Eddie Royal. And in that game, Eddie Royal had 3 touchdown catches, all under 5 yards. For whatever reason, they got close to the goal line, and they threw it to Eddie Royal. And somehow me just picking Eddie Royal literally out of my ass off the waiver wire that week. That was the difference in me beating you. And the look on your face, you were apoplectic. Like, how am I losing to a 3-touchdown reception game from Eddie Royal?
Eddie Royal. Because, again, the War Room League is 16 teams. Yeah. So, like, the waiver wire is bare. Like, every week you are sifting through the Eddie Royals of the world. Yeah. And so, you pick up Eddie Royal hoping for a couple of points and maybe you get a cheapo touchdown. But, like, because, there's like 6 or 7 wide receivers like that were getting like, a handful of targets a game. Maybe they get you 10 points. Maybe you luck out they get in the end zone. But 3 of the most gimme junk, you got to be kidding me, touchdowns from Eddie effing Royal. And it was torturous. And I mean, like, that was just like, I was. Thank you for bringing that up. I'm so glad. I had forgotten that memory. I had repressed it, and now I'm going to be annoyed all day.
It's one of my favorite moments because I was like, there's no way this should be happening. And I almost felt bad, but I was like, this was a gift. This was a total bleeping gift. Okay, let's wrap this up with this. If you were going to compile a list, because you do this love-hate every season to start, and you update it every week. Here's why I love this week. Here's why I hate this week. If you could draft your all-time top 5 loves and all-time top 5 hates, who would they be? Or do you want to just go 3? You want to go 3? Let's go 3. Let's go 3.
I'm just trying to think of like hates. I mean, I'll say in love. I'll stick with love. I'll be positive.
Okay.
So, in terms of all-time top 3, I mean, like, I guess I got to say Brady, right? Yeah. I mean, because like, Brady has the most fantasy points of any quarterback in history, any more fantasy points of any player in history. I mean, I will say, Peyton Manning's 55 touchdown season.
That was ridiculous.
That was pretty amazing.
Ridiculous.
So he would be on that. LaDainian Tomlinson. Yeah. I still think LaDainian Tomlinson is the greatest fantasy player of all time. When LaDainian Tomlinson was there under Norv, there was a few years there with the Chargers where just, if you got LaDainian Tomlinson, you won your league.
Yeah.
He was just so money in the bank.
Clinton Portis had to be way up there when he was at his peak, right?
Yeah. Oh, I mean, like, we could talk through like all sorts of greats, but you asked me for 3, so I'm giving you 1 at every position, and then got to go with Randy Moss.
Yeah.
Randy Moss, especially his season in New England, like, that was a magical season.
Well, to your point about just making something out of nothing, like his rookie year, Randy Moss only had 3 catches against the Cowboys on Thanksgiving Day, but they were for 163 yards and 3 touchdowns. Like, he didn't need volume. He was volume. The mailbox, I'm open. As soon as he does that. Yeah. So, Well, listen.
And
yeah, go ahead.
Dante Culpepper was a great fantasy pick. I got one hate for you.
Okay.
I got one all-time fantasy football hate.
Eddie Royal?
Eddie Royal. Of course. Screw Eddie Royal.
Oh, God bless. I wonder what Eddie's doing now. And Eddie, let me just say from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much for a magical Sunday, 2015 or 14, whatever it was. Hey, well, listen, man, it's great to catch up with you. Continued success. You're absolutely killing it. And you are the absolute authority when it comes to fantasy football.
Well, I appreciate that, Trey. Listen, and if you enjoy this podcast, listen to our fantasy podcast, The Fantasy Focus, wherever you get your podcast. So a company would want me to put in a plug, so there you go.
You got it. Chick-fil-A for everybody, my friend. Talk soon. Once again, thanks to my good friend Matthew Berry for joining us, and thank you, Matthew, for also continuing to enjoy the joking on the Eddie Royal game. Again, no one saw that coming. It was a gift from the gods. And speaking of a gift from the gods, the season is underway, but we're going to be joined next week by Mark and mine's very good friend, who was a longtime member of the Raiders front office and earned one of the greatest nicknames of all time, the Princess of Darkness, and now she does great work for CBS Sports. Amy Trask will be with us on the next Chop Shop episode as we try and predict who's going to win all the awards for the upcoming NFL season, which of course is officially underway now that the Cowboys and Bucs game is behind us. We'll see you then.